Smart home as a service is not a new thing. OneVision Resources has been delivering service solutions since 2015. I'm speaking with Jason Griffing, Director of Product for OneVision Resources. He's been instrumental in pioneering innovative solutions to help improve the service experience for technology owners and service providers alike. Stick around and find out if smart home as a service might be in your future. Give us a description of what you do and what OneVision Resources does. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, happy to start there. So thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. In a nutshell, at OneVision Resources, we provide a host of service and support solutions to companies inside of the connected home or smart home space. We also interface directly with the end users of those companies that we partner with. So we have a nationwide network of home technology service providers that are on our platform, leveraging our solutions such as an outsourced contact center where they can direct 100% of their inbound client support requests to our team. We'll handle all of those requests in their name and provide those clients with a really highly responsive 24/7, 365 support experience. In addition to that, we provide a host of sort of recurring revenue and revenue generation offerings for our integrators as well. So really focused as a company on trying to improve the overall service and support experience inside of the smart home for both service providers and end users alike.
Great. So just to be clear, are your primary customers integrators and service providers, or do you do any work directly with consumers?
I would say that our primary customers are the integrators. They're the home technology professionals that hire us to really help come in and restore work-life balance, bring a sense of sanity back to the business. Anyone out there who's listening who happens to be an integrator will know that providing the ongoing service and support for these connected home systems is an enormously challenging thing to do for these companies. So the integrators typically hire us to come in and help with that, and again, provide this host of solutions that we provide for them. However, our model is pretty unique. Technically speaking, we're not a B2B company. We're actually a B2B2C company, but ultimately we do engage directly with consumers as well. However, it's a little bit unique in that everything we do as far as engaging directly with those consumers and end users is all done 100% in the integrator's name. So if you're an end user who owns a home and you happen to call in, who's on our platform, if you're going to call in and you end up talking to our team, you're not even going to know OneVision exists. Everything we do is done 100% as an extension of the integrator's brand.
Wow, that's really interesting. I think most of us are familiar with a pay-per-service model for tech support where we pay each time we want something done. I mean, certainly with consumers, we're used to dealing with electricians, plumbers, and other tradespeople. But paying a subscription or an ongoing monthly fee, whatever the price, is a little more unusual. How do you see that acceptance has been for that, and how do you convince consumers, the actual final purchasers in this case of the service, that it's in their best interest to go forward with a subscription rather than just paying when they think they need help?
Overall, I would say that the acceptance of these sorts of models is going up in the industry as more and more integrators are adopting these models, and consumers are getting increasingly accustomed to the fact that when they fill their home with these sorts of gadgets and technology, inevitably things are going to break. They're going to break at very inopportune times, and they're going to need that on-demand support experience at their fingertips when that happens. It can often be during a big party for the Super Bowl or a dinner party or things like that. And you want to make sure that you have that support there right when you need it. Ultimately, the comparisons with other trades like electricians, plumbers, things of that nature are somewhat inevitable. I think that home technology professionals get compared to them in that way, but I think it's fundamentally different in the sense that as a homeowner, when let's say you build a new home and you move into your house, generally speaking, when the electrical is done or when the plumbing is done, You're going to know that it's done. You're going to write your subcontractor a check, and then you're probably not going to see them again until maybe you have an electrical upgrade you want to do, or you've got a clogged sink or a clogged toilet, down the road or something. Technology is very different. As anyone who's lived with this technology in their home knows, things are constantly updating. Things are breaking. Firmware updates are coming out. New features are being released. There's a lot of different, there's just a very, very high degree of moving parts associated with these systems. And so more than any other trade in the home, I would argue that the service relationship that you have with your home technology professional is just that. It's that ongoing relationship. It is a really, really critical piece of the overall puzzle and the client experience. So as far as the client side and what's really in it for them to be on one of these sorts of subscription plans, we generally recommend that integrators sell these as optional, so clients are not required to purchase one of these. But ultimately, if those clients want the peace of mind that comes with things like guaranteed 24/7 access to remote support, prioritized scheduling, discounted labor rates, those sorts of features, then we do recommend making those plans available as an option to your clients. Ultimately, the adoption amongst integrators, I would say, is also going up. A lot of integrators out there and home technology companies are realizing that there's a really kind of difficult balance. I like to describe it as your classic sort of rock in a hard place scenario, because what's happened over the years with home technology is these systems have just gotten increasingly complex. 15, 20, 30 years ago, a home technology issue might mean calling somebody out to polish the little laser on your Laserdisc player or hook up a speaker that came loose on the amplifier. Nowadays, you've got networks connecting everything. Everything's got an IP address, different control protocols, passwords, logins, all of this sort of thing. And so ultimately, with that, the volume of what we call sort of basic support issues, the types of issues that your client can give you a call and you can typically walk them through fixing that over the phone with a reboot or something of that nature, those sorts of basic support issues, the volume of those has gone up tremendously over the years. And then on the flip side of that, those are the hardest issues to bill for under that traditional break fix model, right? So if a client calls you on a Friday night, their Apple TV is not working, they can't watch the movie, they're super happy if 15 minutes later you got them up and running because you rebooted a couple things and figured it out. They're not so happy Monday morning when you send them a $125 invoice for your time, right? And so those little basic support issues that are constantly coming up and kind of nagging at clients, you want to be able to fix those quickly, and then you want to be able to do so under a financial or service delivery model that's not going to require you to start sending invoices out to your clients every time they pick up the phone and call you. So we really do believe at OneVision that the subscription model, if it's packaged and priced and delivered correctly, is a win-win for both the home technology professional as well as the client.
So I'm curious, from your information, what percentage of calls are emergency calls where something urgently is down or not working? Like, as you said, the Apple TV, they're trying to watch a game or a movie or a live event. How many are informational calls, like I forgot my password or I don't know how to do something? And how many are just general issues like we're having trouble with a speaker or we want someone to come take a look at something, but it's not super urgent?
Yeah, it's a really excellent question. I don't have hard data at my fingertips, but I can definitely share some anecdotal thoughts there. So typically what we find is that integrators who are considering offering this sort of thing are generally over-indexing on the amount of calls that they think are coming in or that are going to come to them that are really, really, truly urgent. Like, I can't get the lights to turn off in my master bedroom and it's time to go to bed and somebody needs to get out here and I don't care that it's 10:30 at night, right? Those types of issues, statistically speaking, are pretty rare. The other complicating factor here is that one of our big beliefs at OneVision, and I think this will resonate with end users who might be listening here, is that urgency is very subjective. It is very driven by the person who's calling in with the issue. So for one person, the Apple TV not working to watch Netflix might be a my hair is on fire type of emergency, whereas for the other person, all other things being equal, that might be just a minor inconvenience and they'll go watch something else, right? And so the urgency is really driven by the client. And this is one of the big reasons why we're such big proponents of giving clients choice. So I said a few minutes ago, we don't generally recommend that a paid membership is required of any client to enjoy their smart home system. However, we do generally recommend that memberships be available for those clients who want that peace of mind and access to that type of support 24/7, 365. The other thing that I'll mention here is that a lot of times those issues that come in that are, as perceived by the client, quite urgent in the moment, even if you're not able to solve those, often the biggest thing that the client needs is, number one, to offload that issue onto their provider. So get it off their list and just know, like, okay, my provider's got it. It's going to be taken care of. And the sort of sense of relief that comes with that. The other big thing is that through creativity and workarounds, you can often find ways to de-escalate the situation. Ideally, you can fully resolve the issue remotely, but that's not always a possibility. And even if you can't, you can often find creative ways to de-escalate the situation. So going back to the Netflix example, if a client's having trouble getting the Netflix up and running on their Apple TV, maybe you can teach them how to do it on their laptop, or maybe there's a Netflix app on the TV itself that you can get them to switch inputs and use that instead, right? There are lots of ways you can sort of navigate that. So in closing, I'll share that at least at OneVision, we have a number that we look at that's called our combined solve and de-escalation rate. And what that number entails is basically of all of the inbound support requests that we deal with every month, which is over 10,000 at this point, 96% of those are either solved by our remote support team or at least de-escalated to the point that the client is willing and able to wait until Monday morning or the next business day. So again, with some creativity and some good problem-solving skills and the right tooling and processes in place, you can generally get that urgency down and get clients to a better place, regardless of whether or not you're able to fully solve the issue in that moment.
Thank you. That was very insightful and a lot of detail on what the process really entails. It does lead me to another question. You talk about troubleshooting and solving a problem. Now, as I understand it, you don't have the software configurations and the specific hardware inventory of the client. So you're working on sort of a generalized troubleshooting process flow. I'm curious, how successful is that? And do some clients have concerns when you say, well, I don't know exactly, tell me what's connected where, or what do you have plugged in to HDMI 1 or etc. So is there a friction point, or do you find that you can troubleshoot and get them to de-escalation or problem resolution in any case?
Yeah, excellent question, and a very common question as well that we hear. There's a couple of different ways I like to speak to this question when it comes up. So number one of our big philosophies at OneVision as it relates to training our basic, what we call our basic support team, our tech specialists who provide the support, is taking, like you alluded to there, a very principled top-down approach to troubleshooting. So starting with the opposite of what that would look like, a company might say, okay, well, we're going to really rely on this one sort of remote support tool, and if that's there, we'll use that. But and that can work great, but ultimately then what happens if that's not there, right? And then you're not able to do much for the client at all. So we start first with this kind of top-down approach of really making sure that everybody on our basic support team has a really solid grasp of things like fundamental signal flow, signal routing, basic control protocols, what those look like, how they're used, all of those sorts of core principles. Because ultimately, it as a technology guy, I'm a technology guy, the boxes are inputs and outputs at the end of the day. It's a bunch of I/O in the house. There's inputs and there's outputs and there's signal moving around. And ultimately, the name of the game is figuring out why typically a signal is not getting from point A to B correctly. And when you really start to understand that at a deep kind of fundamental level, there's actually a lot you can do with just that type of knowledge. Now, in addition to that, we do at OneVision have a whole host of different tools and things that we use to make sure that we can provide those clients with the best experience possible. So I won't get into gory detail on all of this. Happy to go into it deeper if you'd like, but ultimately we've got, number one, some software that we use, some ticketing and kind of CRM type of software that our partner integrators who are on our platform interface with us through this shared software environment. It does a whole bunch of different things, but in the context of this specific question, it provides tools for the integrator to enter system documentation. So basic information about the types of devices that are in the home, where is the rack located, where's the network router, who's the ISP, a bunch of those types of basic pieces of information that can really help us, including system photos as well. So there's that. And then in addition to that, we do take what we call a vendor agnostic approach at OneVision. So instead of limiting ourselves to one type of remote support platform, as you know, in the industry, there are several of these now. There's Domos, there's Oversee, there's Bluebolt, there's Wattbox. There's a bunch of different tools that do various things like remote reboots and system monitoring. And at OneVision, we try to cast a wide net with that stuff and support as many of those devices as we can. So ultimately, our partner integrators are able to indicate inside of our software if a client has any of these tools in their home. We are set up on the OneVision side to be able to access those tools and get in and use everything at our disposal there to try to help the client through that technology issue and get them to a better place. So I would say, in summary, it's a combination of training that we've really worked hard to develop over the last 7 or 8 years that we've been around, that top-down fundamental principled approach to troubleshooting, as well as smart use of technology to enable our team with the tools and information they need to provide those clients with a great experience.
You've certainly been doing this for quite a while, so you've got a lot of experience in practical knowledge in what works and what doesn't and how to approach it. I do want to just drill down on one thing, which is a lot of issues I deal with personally with some of my clients. It always comes down to passwords. So how do you handle the fact that passwords are, especially the novice, it's saved in the app or it's saved in their iPhone. They don't even know what it is, and now they reboot it or they got a new phone and the password's no longer there or no longer working. Is that something you can resolve, or you just have to walk them through it and sometimes go back to the service provider or the original installer to get that info?
Passwords are a fairly common one, and today the way that we do that is we do escalate that over to our service providers. So in our context, we call them advanced support. Our team, once again, is basic support. And today, basic support does not do password management. It is on our roadmap. It is something that we've started to hear increasing requests for, some ability to manage that. So as you can imagine, there are lots of data privacy concerns around that, and making sure that you have a very robust system in place to make sure that those passwords are not only being stored securely, but transmitted securely. So you can set up a 1Password instance or something like that to securely store them. But then when clients email in or call in, you also have to have a secure way to transmit those to your clients. Now, for integrators operating at a local level with close relationships with their clients, those kinds of things are a little easier to navigate around. As a service provider working with tons of companies all over North America, we have to take a bit more of a rigorous approach to making sure that we're managing that correctly. So today, again, passwords are something that we can take down some information and get that over to our partner. Thankfully, we do on our platform have a lot of mechanisms in place to make sure that those, what we call escalations, when we escalate something over to the partner, we're able to provide a lot of detailed notes, as well as various levels of urgency and notification. So if a client, again, is having a password issue on something that's very low urgency, that might be something that can wait until Monday. If a client is having a password issue that is affecting movie night and their 10-year-old kid has 5 friends over and it's utter pandemonium in the house and they're a paying member, that's a different issue entirely, right? So we do have mechanisms in place to make sure that those more urgent notifications are getting attention very promptly from the partner. And ultimately, password management, like I said, is something that's definitely on our roadmap and something that we're evaluating in the future, because you're absolutely right. The number of passwords and different accounts that people have to manage has just skyrocketed over the years, and so that is becoming an increasing concern.
So one more somewhat technical detail. Do you employ any screen sharing or real-time interaction with the consumer or the customer, or is that a level of detail actually you would think is a failure if you have to go to that point in trying to solve their problem?
Yeah, so another good question. Today, we do not do any sort of video support or screen sharing. We're, again, able to get really, really good results generally without having to go to that step. Ultimately, I do think the future does contain more of that than we're seeing today. We have experimented with video control in the past, and frankly, the results that we got were suboptimal. Generally speaking, there was a lot of lag and experience that we were seeing like that in the overall user experience. So that's one of those things today that, again, we typically we recommend inside of our framework to reserve that for our advanced support team. Ultimately, in the future, I think as those streaming video protocols continue to get better, that's something that we'll take another look at. Another consideration there for, any of the integrators who might be in your audience thinking about that is also generally that unless you're just going to go with something like a FaceTime call to your client, which again at the local level from the integrator directly to the client could be a viable option. But ultimately, if you want your clients doing it through like a support app, for example, like a standardized app that you're using, there's also kind of a point of friction that comes from the client calling in and being told, hey, before we can jump in and troubleshoot this, I need you to, install this app. We'll get through that installation process, then we'll jump in. So those are some of the hurdles also to think about. But like I said, I think today with a combination of the right questions, the right approaches, the right documentation, you can generally get pretty darn far without having to go to that level. And then those more rare kind of advanced support issues where you really need to get eyes on the site or get into a screen sharing type of environment, those are things that we typically recommend for the local service provider.
That makes sense, definitely. I can see the point of view there, and the pragmatic approach really makes sense. If we step back and look at the business of smart home as a service, that's become a pretty hot buzzword again. I think it goes in cycles, and now we're seeing a lot of activity. We're seeing some of the former principals from Control4, which is a player, or certainly a dominant player in the traditional luxury smart home market. They've gone off and started a company called Oliver IQ. I did a video on that a few weeks ago that is focusing on also trying to deliver smart home service solutions. But I find it interesting that they've turned their back on the entire integrator and dealer channel, and they're really looking to deliver that service directly to mass market consumers, supporting really entry-level mass market devices and partnering, as I understand it, primarily with very large service providers and even perhaps mass retail stores or online e-commerce companies. And there's been real mixed success with trying to do that type of thing in the past. So I've got a two-part question, and then I'll turn it over to you. What do you think in general of the smart home as a service being brought to the market? And then secondly, the approach of bringing it directly to consumers, which is a different model than how you're approaching it at OneVision Resources.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic to watch as more companies try to figure this out and come in with these novel approaches. So the team over at Oliver IQ, I know some very experienced industry veterans that are at the helm of that initiative, and I think it's an intriguing approach that they're taking. Generally speaking, I will say that our operating thesis, so to speak, at OneVision is that the smart home as a service it's a real thing, and it is increasingly going to become almost the standard concept over time that people associate these sorts of subscriptions with the service and support that they're getting inside of their smart home. We believe that is best approached by starting a sort of top-down approach, working with the integrators directly, and ultimately that is our sole focus, right? Is starting there, and anything that we do to enable further that smart home as a service is going to be through the integrator. We believe in the integration channel. We think that is a very robust, very mature channel to deliver these sorts of experiences into the home. And we believe that the professional will always be required in order to provide that great support. Ultimately, I know that some of the bigger initiatives aimed at coming at this sort of direct to consumer approach are really going to be hamstrung, or have in the past, I should say, at least been hamstrung by the fact that you really need that local presence on the ground still for a lot of the types of issues that are going to come up in the smart home. There's only so far that you're going to be able to go with remote support. And so ultimately, again, establishing the business model and the economics around going through a channel like we do with the CEDIA channel, and having those integrators, having the relationship between the integrator and the client be held as sacred, having nothing really come between that, and then taking the approach where we're just going to enable the back end and bring the infrastructure and scale into the equation, but allow the partner to, again, maintain that local presence and maintain that direct relationship, we think is the best approach. However, with that said, I think for as long as the smart home has been around, and as much as people like us who like to nerd out about it continue to talk about mainstream adoption year after year, I think we're still relatively early days. And I think as time continues to march on, there's going to be more and more technology in the home, not less. It's not going to go the other way. It's going to continue to increase. And I think the need for a variety of different approaches to deliver that level of service and support into the smart home is going to be increasingly necessary as that forward march of technology continues. So I'm generally very bullish on seeing companies like this come in and try to innovate and come up with new creative models to deliver that experience. And I think overall, it's a great thing. It's a great thing to see.
Along those lines, but from less of a competitive posture, one of the consumer models that we've seen come and go is the concept of leasing, or more specifically, providing the equipment for free while charging for the service. So in the smart home as a service model, do you think there's room, or does it make sense for some companies to try to provide all the smart home equipment and products essentially for no cost to the consumer, while providing a cradle-to-grave services solution based on subscription or payments, so they never worry about the hardware is refreshed, or the hardware is provided based on the solution chosen by the provider? So my question is, what do you think of that? And have you seen any interest in the dealer and integrator channels? I think I read a while ago that 1 or 2 integrators were trying it, but I'm not up to speed on the status.
That definition of smart home as a service, if you're going to go all the way to, leasing the equipment, right, and not having the traditional model where a client purchases the equipment and then purchases the service separately, but you effectively roll those into one and the same thing, I think is another one of those innovative and interesting approaches that I mentioned. And I love seeing the experimentation. There are some integrators in the industry that are doing that successfully. We have one partner on our platform, and I know he's quite public about it, so I'm comfortable mentioning his name. And Total Home Technologies on the East Coast, they're big on this in the CEDIA channel. They're kind of out there beating the drum. Keith and his team, they really believe fundamentally that this is the future, and they're killing it. They're having great success with it. So it can be done. I think it is a significant paradigm shift for integrators to think about that. And ultimately, the biggest thing that I think from the business side of that is really understanding the financials of it and having the cash flow to back it. There's very large upfront investments required in order to procure all of that equipment and then have that on a kind of a leasing type of program. That is a complicated thing to pull off, so it's no small feat. I think on the consumer side of that question, it's a very attractive proposition. Technology is always changing and upgrading, and I know, like for example, at our work at OneVision with our laptops, we're on a leasing program with Apple. So every few years we get a new computer. And it works out great. They've structured that to where, presumably it works well for their business. Otherwise, they wouldn't be offering it. And it works out great for us because you're continually able to upgrade every few years and not have to worry about your technology going out of date. So in the smart home, that's a really attractive proposition. Certainly comes with its set of challenges. Anyone who's ever stuck their head behind a fully integrated audio-visual rack with all the wiring and everything that's involved there, something that sounds simple like swapping out a receiver for a new one. Well, the speaker posts were on this side of the old one, and now they're on this side of the new one, and all my wiring is laced up, and that, little things like that can be really challenging when it comes to swapping out equipment in the smart home. So those are some of the details to think through. But again, on the consumer side, for the right types of devices, for the right system, I think the idea of being able to lease equipment and do it all as a service that you pay for, and those things are getting upgraded over time automatically is super attractive. And I do anticipate that the future will bring more of that and not less of it.
In the consumer space, personally, I think the bigger opportunities might be in apartments or condominiums where there's somewhat a standardized deployment. There are restrictions. They have to have certain locks anyways, or the thermostats are all the same. So it might be easier for them to be providing everything and standardizing and then just offering it as a service. Is that an area where OneVision Resources participates in what the industry calls multi-dwelling units or high-rise apartment buildings, or are you focused more on the single-family home market?
Yeah, we definitely do have partners who are very active in the MDU vertical or space, as it were, and that is I think it's a great point that you made as it relates to smart home as a service in particular. Anytime you can get into more wash, rinse, and repeat templated types of systems, that does open up interesting opportunities that aren't always available in the luxury, very bespoke single-family residential world. So we do operate in the MDU space. It's a great market if you're able to penetrate that market and get the right relationships going, and ultimately, like with homes as well, the rate of adoption of technology in those environments just continues to go up. Developers, contractors, they all know that particularly if they want to advertise their building as a luxury building, there is some baseline level of expectation amongst those luxury clients for the level of convenience and entertainment and security that comes with a technology system. So there's some really great opportunities in the MDU space, and like many integrators out there, it's a market that we're interested in continuing to explore and penetrate even further than we are today.
Of course, we can't talk about the smart home and consumers without mentioning the big elephants in the room. Now, we can argue about whether they're really a large presence or successful or just still tiptoeing around or completely have no idea what they're doing. But Google, Amazon, Samsung sell a lot of consumer products. And of course, Apple has HomeKit, which is very well received amongst the techno-enthusiasts. I don't know if the average consumer is heavily into HomeKit yet. And Samsung bought SmartThings a while ago as their core of their smart home effort, and they're now integrating it into all of their appliances. And then we have Google, and it's hard to keep track because every day they're killing something and introducing something else and renaming the same product 20 times. But nonetheless, humor aside, Apple certainly has been moving heavily towards services. Of course, to them, services are music and cloud storage and other things. But do you see any of these large consumer companies making a move in this area, or is a full service solution just a bridge too far for a product consumer company like these?
If I had to rub my crystal ball and make a prediction about the future for any sort of robust smart home as a service offering from companies like Apple, Google, etc., I wouldn't put a lot of money on it. I know Amazon has dabbled in the space more so than the others when it comes to actually having, local presence, things like that. So I wouldn't be totally shocked if Amazon continued to explore there. But ultimately, I think that the future continues to look a lot like the present, with maybe just shifting proportions. So I think, to make that more concrete, there's always going to be, in my opinion, a very strong contingent of the types of traditional integrators that we see today that are serving their local markets, doing a fantastic job doing that focusing generally on the upper sort of third or half of the market as far as, income, disposable income, those sorts of things. So those higher end demographics, the people that are willing to pay for that local service, I think it's going to continue to look like that, much like other trades, electricians, plumbers, all of those sorts of trades. Like that's generally, I think, the trajectory there. I do think that the bottom end of the market, and by bottom, I don't mean anything, derogatory, but just as far as the disposable income and the luxury versus kind of mid-market versus down-market segmentation, I think we'll see more round out there, but I don't generally think that those are going to be companies like Apple and Google providing that. I think it'll generally be more. We're already starting to see some hints of this in the industry with companies like Daisy and Savvy Home. So there's some new franchise players coming into the market that are trying to start franchises around the country, and we're working with a couple of these players to take a look at that opportunity. So I think we could see more of that, more maybe consolidation, mergers and acquisitions, and kind of unified branding in different markets of the country. But I think that Apple, Google, Amazon, they want to be able to sell software, they want to be able to sell hardware, and the cost and the ongoing support overhead of trying to be that presence who's there to take care of all of the issues and keep everything up and running. I just don't see that being hugely attractive to a company like Apple or Google. I think there's very good businesses that can be built around that. I just don't think that they're the types of businesses that the Apples and the Googles of the world are interested in.
I would tend to agree, and I think your overall comment that this is early times and we're seeing a lot of experimental and innovative approaches being tried. Ultimately, that's the best thing for consumers and dealers and manufacturers, that nothing's predetermined. There's a lot of wiggle room to just try a few things and see how they work out. Certainly not aimlessly and without forethought, but we're in early days here. Jason, any final thoughts? And then let us know how we can contact you and follow up for more details.
Yeah, no major final thoughts. Again, I appreciate the opportunity, you having me on the show. Love what you're doing to, promote education and get the messaging out about all the great things going on in the home technology space. As far as contacting me, if anyone's listening and wants to get in touch, I'd love to hear from them. Probably the easiest way to do that would just be to find me on LinkedIn. Jason Griffing. There's a G at the end of my name, which makes me a little easier to find. Most people look for Jason Griffin, but it's Griffing, Griffing. Shoot me a message. I keep a pretty close eye on that platform.
Thank you again, Jason. A great discussion. I learned a lot, and I think that our viewers will also learn quite a bit and have a better appreciation for what's happening with smart home as a service.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Are you building or expanding your own smart home system? For home automation secrets that might help you, watch this video next.